Let us take a closer look at the color map of the corset front. Now we need to think of a way to make our work easier. To do that, we should choose a special sewing technique to avoid joining small fabric squares, which is very time-consuming. No, we will figure out the color repeat order on the color map and sew the fabric strip sets to get the desired motif. Let us start with the center front piece. Examine the color map and you will notice a particular order of fabric alternation along the vertical rows. If we take the first vertical row on the right and move from the top down, you will see the following sequence: large scale print, small scale print, and blue fabric. Move one square down diagonally to get the next vertical row. The pattern repeats itself. We just have one more blue square. Now we go to the third vertical row and see that the pattern combination is the same. We just add subsequent colors according to the color map. The alternation pattern we found means that we don't have to waste time on sewing separate fabric patches together. Instead, we will use a rather unusual but absolutely riveting patchwork technique, bargello. It is the art of sewing squares of fabric together to create waves of variegated and carefully graded colors for eye-catching motifs. The garments made with bargello technique look intricate, but in fact, they are simple to make and suitable for complete beginners. The key challenge is to follow the color repeat order. For that reason, I cut the fabric strips, not fabric squares. I knew which technique I was going to use. All strips are 25 or 50 centimeters long. The latter you can easily cut in half. The length of 25 centimeters is enough for our corset. Let us start with the longest vertical row in the middle of the center front piece. I lay the fabric strips according to the color repeat order. Following the sequence, large scale print, small scale print, two blue strips, light pink strip, dark pink strip, and again a light pink one. All strips are 25 centimeters long. There, I have a layout of our pattern design. Now I will prepare the strips for sewing. I pin the strips together along the 0.7 centimeter seam allowance line. That is the sequence we follow to make a strip set with 7mm seam allowance. Sewing the strips is much easier than sewing the small squares. I think you will agree with that. Well, I stitched together all the strips with equal seam allowance. Now I need to press the seams. Actually, there is a special rule for that in patchwork. You should press the seams towards the darker fabric side so that you don't see them through the light-colored fabric. But it is different with the Bargello technique. You should press the seams in one direction. I will try sticking to the main rule, but in this case, some seams will be pressed toward each other and some in opposite directions. Which rule to follow? The decision is up to you. Just remember to check the front side and make sure everything looks neat. I sew the edges of the strip set together to form a tube and turn it inside out. It might be hard to press the last stitching seam without creasing the others, so I use a seam creaser instead of the iron. It is really handy. However, if you don't have this tool, you can do it with your finger. I place the tube along the horizontal line on the mat, smooth it out, and trim the edge to make it straight. Then I cut the tube into rings of fabric 4.5 centimeters wide. The tube is now cut in rings 4.5 centimeters wide. Let us look at the color map. The far right row of the center front piece starts with a large flower, then multicolored square, small flower, etc. I take one ring and find the square with a large flower. I unpick the seam between the large flower square and the light pink square. I lay the strip out flat, and voila! My first patchwork row is ready. I take the second strip, unpick the seam, and lay it flat beside the first strip. Make sure to shift the strip one square down. I continue in this way and lay the vertical strips according to the color map. Pretty soon, I saw the pattern design I planned. I need to fill the gaps in my pattern with large flower squares to make the motif complete. I should add 3 squares in the middle row, 2 squares in the adjacent rows, and 1 square in 2 other rows. I select the strips with large flowers that match the motif best. Make a strip set and cut it in 4.5 centimeter squares. Then I fill in the pattern gaps. I sew all the rows into vertical strips. I also broke the main patchwork rule and pressed the seams in the opposite directions to make the future corset pieces less thick. As our squares are rather small, the corset pieces may turn out too thick. Here is my result. The only thing left for me to do is to make 2 angles on blue squares. I take the printed patches and place them on blue squares, right side down. Make sure to position them right. The flower should be in the correct corner after we sew the squares. I do the same thing on the opposite side. Then I pin the top squares diagonally and unpick the seam between the blue square and the one above it. I don't move the upper part of the row. Then I take the strip with a pinned square, fold the square diagonally, and stitch right along its fold line. I repeat the same thing with a second strip. I take a ruler and a rotary cutter and cut the square along the stitch line I just made. Make sure to keep 7 mm seam allowance. I fold the corner and press the seam with a seam creaser. Then I return the square to the vertical row. Now I will do the same with the second strip. It might look very difficult, but in fact it is very easy. You just need to get the idea. Well, the second square is ready and our pattern is complete. Now I will sew back the strips with corners. I strongly advise you to double-check your pattern and compare it to the color map before joining all the strips together. A couple of light pink squares are missing, so I cut them out and fill the gaps. Now we have a pretty challenging task to tackle. We need to sew together all the strips and do our best to align the fabric squares. I know it sounds hard given the small square size of 3 by 3 centimeters, but still, you should make every effort. Here are some expert tips to get the sewing right and avoid the common pitfalls. You should sew the strips one by one, starting with the last in the row. You place this last strip on top of the next one, right side down, pin them along the first horizontal seam, and make a short stitch at a seam allowance distance of 0.7 centimeters. You should start at the top edge and finish slightly below the pin. Then you raise the presser foot, align the next pair of squares, pin them together, and make just 2 to 3 stitches to secure the fabric. And just like that, moving from top to bottom, you join together the strips along their horizontal seam lines. Then you flip the strip-pieced unit right side up and check how well the squares align. If needed, make the changes. It won't be difficult. I love this method because it is much easier to unpick 2 to 3 stitches than to rip out a finished strengthening stitch. This method may seem very time-consuming at first, but believe me, it will save you lots of time in the future. Once you are happy with the result and all the squares align perfectly, you make a strengthening stitch along the whole strip. Then you do the same with the rest of the strips one by one. Please note, all the stitching must be made in one direction, from top to bottom, or vice versa, from bottom to top. Well, the strips are joined together to form a piece of fabric. All the seams are pressed. Now I want to discuss a rather unfortunate situation I had to deal with. You should know it can happen to anyone, no matter how experienced you are. After sewing all the strips together, I realized that light pink squares did not look good with the other colors, as they really stood out, and not in a good way. I decided to risk the quality and replaced these pink squares with multicolored squares. The result, however, was very pleasing. And what is more important, I got the color scheme I really liked. I didn't remove the side pink squares, as they will be used in seam allowance for corset pieces. Now I need to steam the fabric. I put a pressing cloth on the piece, sprayed it with water, and pressed with an iron. No steam. Make sure to let the fabric cool down on the table.